Welcome to the Empower and Evolve podcast, a space where we will explore topics ranging from mindset to career to business, energetics, spirituality, cyclical living, and beyond. I am your host, Kat Tunnyberg. I am a mindset coach and integrative practitioner on a mission to help you take your life from meh to magical. Without further ado, let's plunge into today's episode. Well, hello there, gorgeous. I hope you're having an incredible day wherever you are tuning in from. I am actually nervous to record this podcast episode, which is so interesting. Today, we're going to talk about taking radical self-responsibility. Ooh, this is such a juicy topic. And it's actually a topic that gets me a lot of hate. A lot of people disagree with it. And I actually didn't realize this until I read a post by someone else recently. And I will read you the post afterwards just so you can kind of see. But I had this realization. I harp on and on about self-responsibility and taking radical responsibility and realizing that you are the creator of your own life and like how empowering that is. And not everyone likes that. We live in a society that likes to blame, shame, and justify. We live in a society where, and this is what's going to get me hate, but I'm going to say it anyway, where it's okay to be a victim and where you will get a lot of love and compassion and attention when you're a victim. And yet, no. Many of us are encouraged to actually take radical self-responsibility. So if this is already, you're noticing you're getting a visceral reaction from this podcast episode, I invite you to stay with me until the end. Just keep an open mind. And I want to put the disclaimer in here that what I'm about to tell you doesn't mean that I am victim shaming or saying that terrible things don't happen or saying that whoever did horrible things to you, it's okay. Like, it's none of that. None of that. Because terrible things do happen. Terrible fucking things happen to us. And some people have it way worse than others. And some of us have privileged and all the freaking things. And it all comes to play. And it still comes down to taking radical self-responsibility in order to create the life that you want. And this, my darling, this triggers the hell out of people. So what does taking radical responsibility mean? And I'm going to be talking about this in the sense of personal development. Taking radical responsibility means fully owning your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and their consequences without blame, without excuses, or without the victim mentality. It actually involves recognizing that you are the creator of your life, the experiences, and of your growth. And your future depends on your willingness to face challenges, to learn from your mistakes, and make empowered choices. And this level of responsibility really requires deep self-awareness. It requires the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. And it requires a commitment to continuous self-improvement. Because it's all about stepping into your power and understanding that while you may not control everything that happens to you, you do control how you respond. And you do control how you grow from these experiences. So I want to read you this post by Carla Treadway. Carla and I are in a mastermind together, and I really love her. She's fearless. She really shares her opinions publicly, and she's very outspoken, and she doesn't really care if she gets a lot of hate or anything. But recently she wrote a post. I'm going to read you this post. I lose more followers for this than anything else that I do. When I talk about building bridges, seeking solutions, and trying to see things from another lens, because a lot of people would much rather I rage farm, point fingers at the other side, and complain about being a victim because it's something that people love to commiserate on. I do believe there are multiple sinister agendas going on here. I do believe that there are bad guys, and I agree that we have had some terrible things done to us. But more importantly, I believe that it's not helpful for us to stay in that energy. We have to learn how to talk with one another. We have to take radical responsibility for our role in allowing all of this to happen. We have to ditch the dopamine chasing in favor of real solutions that require much, much more personal discipline. It's not the polarizing opinions that lose me followers. It's this softer side of me that believes that things aren't black and white, that there are still good people working within politics, the schools, and our communities. The part that will forgive, the part that talks about very unsexy things like taking action in our personal lives, small communities, and families. Personally, those people can leave this space. The ones that want me to add to the division, the ones that want me to live in fear and resentment, the ones that want me to believe that nothing can be done, the ones that want me to paint an entire group of people as one way. The world is totally upside down right now. I get why people are angry, scared, and feeling victimized by it all. But there's a ton of content out there that people can marinate in if they want. I am not piled over here. I am solutions oriented. I'm focused on helping awake entrepreneurs build a real future for themselves, regardless of what's happening in the world. I'm focused on building bridges and having better conversations. I'm focused on actually enjoying the freedom and the life that I create. I see a lot of entrepreneurs getting caught in this trap in your own personal brands. The polarizing content will get you a ton of attention, likes, and follows. The real you that's rooted in your value system might not be as attention grabbing. I just let that land. When I read that, I had this realization. I was like, yeah, that is why I get a lot of hate for the concepts that I teach, for the way I empower people to see things from another perspective, from instead of blame, shame, and justify and putting it all on another person, taking radical responsibility. I get a lot of hate for that. And when I do speak about these kind of things, I end up getting a lot of people unfollowing me. And I find this so curious. Because what is wrong with taking radical self-responsibility? I just don't understand. I just don't get it. Like the only thing that I can think of is the fact that people have a hard time pointing a finger at themselves and actually ask themselves hard questions about what they can do about the situation. Because you do play a role in this. You do play a role in this. You absolutely do play a role in this. Because everything that is happening in your life, in one way or another, you are tolerating or allowing. So it's easy to point your finger at someone else, to blame outside circumstances that you have no control over, and say that these are the reasons why you are not where you want to be. Why, like, this is where we label ourselves and we use excuses to stay where we are at instead of finding ways to change. And if we like zoom out of this, just think about the long-term effect of this on your life. If you point fingers and put blame and shame outside of you, you actually give your power away. You actually give your power away. Because if you put reason on something that is outside of your control, you can't change that. And maybe that is the reason why people find this topic so confronting, because it's easier to put reason outside of you and just be like, well, that's why it's not happening. my partner is so, so terrible. And you point fingers outside of you, the economy, my partner, because I'm a woman, like you name it. I've heard it all. The amount of times that I have to coach my clients through situations, relationships has been a big one for me recently, coaching my clients through relationships. And, they tell me about all the ways that their partners are falling short. And yeah, sometimes they are legit reasons. Legit reasons. And yet, other times, we actually haven't given our partners the chance to change because we've never, in a loving way, told them about what we actually do want or how we want them to show up. We've never asked ourselves the question, well, what is my role in this? I have a client who has a partner who prioritizes work. And my client really doesn't like that. And whilst I get that, yeah, that fucking sucks if your partner prioritizes work. My client actually struggles with putting herself first, and she'll bend over backwards to do everything for everyone else. So I said to her, can you see how your partner's selfishness is your medicine? You have created this mirror outside of you to show you that you need to be more selfish. Yet when your partner is selfish, it triggers the fuck out of you. And oftentimes when I will say things like this, at first people want to fight me about it because, oh my God, do people want to fight for their limitations? Wow. Oh, wow. It's wild. And yet, if they take a step back and they actually look at the bigger picture, they realize, like, wow, there's some truth in this. There's other situations as well where, someone in their business has a employee and the employee isn't taking care of himself, and that's having negative effects on the business. And then that triggers the person, yet the person completely ignores their self-care. So I'm like, yeah, this person is your medicine. It's a reminder that you're not taking care of yourself, and now you're getting angry at someone else not taking care of themselves. Like, really? This is radical responsibility. Asking yourself, what can you do about it? And there's a concept I like to teach called cause and effect. Something I learned from one of my beautiful mentors. And I have recorded a podcast episode, and I'm like way back when this podcast was still called Connecting Back to You. So I have no idea what I say in that podcast. I may not agree with everything that I've said in there, but you could go and listen to it. But the concept of cause and effect, if I was to put it into a couple of words, would be you can be either at effect of something or you can be at cause of something. When you're at effect, you're fighting for your limitations. Like you point fingers, you blame, shame, and justify. You have all the reasons why you're not yet where you want to be. But it comes back to that situation where if you're at effect, you give away your control, you give away your power. And if you give away your control and your power, you're not going to be able to make a change. So we want to get a cause instead. We want to ask ourselves, like, what is our role in getting where we are right now? How did we end up in this exact situation? Because the truth is that our life is a sum of our conscious and unconscious decisions. And again, this is a hard pill to swallow. And often there's, unconscious programming, ancestral trauma, generational trauma, your personal trauma. Like there's so many layers to this. And your trauma is real. And I wouldn't, someone who's had fresh trauma in their life, I would never go to that person and be like, hey, let's get you at a cause. Like, how did you cause yourself? And no. First, we got to get you to baseline. And if you're currently below baseline, maybe you need to go to therapy to start off. Because therapy can help you get to baseline. Once you're ready to rise above baseline, That's when we want to start to look at things like cause and effect, perception is projection. How have you created your reality and how can you change it? But first, we got to get you to baseline. So I would never use these concepts with someone who has had fresh trauma. But if someone truly wants to change their life and make these big, grandiose changes, it comes down to taking radical responsibility and moving out of that victim mindset. And it's easy to get stuck in the victim mindset because our society actually promotes it. Because, like I said earlier, that's when we get love, we get compassion. There are support groups, and you can like talk over and over again about what has happened to you. And if we zoom out here, I'm currently reading Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And at the beginning of the book, he actually says how he in the past held back from sharing some of his like learnings and teachings because of the fear of how the medical system would judge him for his beliefs and his research, etc. But that he's gotten to a stage now where he just doesn't give a fuck. He's sharing for the people who are ready to hear his message. And quite often that is actually not the medical system, because the medical system likes to have it very black and white. But the truth is that actually no black and white. There's so many layers. There's so many nuances. Like if you listen to episode 50, where I talk about at the end with giving the advice, like I literally give the two polar opposites advice, because it depends. It depends where you land on that spectrum. And there's so many nuances. So anyway, coming back to Dr. Joe Dispenza, in this book, he talks a lot about trauma. And the more that we revisit our trauma and the way it made us feel and really go through it and remember it, we trigger these same responses in our body and we actually recreate our past. And that is how we create disease. So from that lens, like, yes, there's a benefit of talking about all the terrible things that have happened to you and all the ways that people have wronged you, but you're just reliving your past. And through that, you're actually making yourself sick. So there comes a time and a place where it's time to leave the past in the past and move into the future and start to take radical responsibility to make changes in your life. Radical responsibility to look at what has happened in your life and what you can learn from it, how you can move forward, and how are you staying in the victim mindset and by pointing fingers and putting control outside of you, how that actually hinders your growth. And I get it that taking radical self-responsibility can be a little bit of a triggering concept. But ultimately, this is what is going to take you from powerless to powerful. This is what's going to empower you. Because when you can come at cause, when you can start to look at what is my role in this? How did I get here? How can I make a change? Once you start to ask yourself these higher quality questions, you're going to open up your mind to possibilities that are beyond what you have experienced in the past. It's really like coming to those crossroads, like having your something needs to fucking change moment. Because by just doing things the way you have done it in the past, you're just going to recreate the future. And I was actually, if you're looking at the YouTube video, I'm just freshly out of the hairdresser, and I was talking to my hairdresser. And she was asking me a lot about my work, and she was like, oh, do you like find that sometimes people, what they actually need is therapy? And I was like, I've had some clients where, they probably could have benefited more from therapy. But I said to her, most of the clients that come to me that end up working with me are ready to rise above baseline. So I gave her the whole example of therapy gets you to baseline and coaching gets you above baseline. And she had this epiphany while she was talking to me. She was like, oh my God, That is actually very much what I've experienced. Like therapy has helped me immensely, but I feel like I can only get to a certain layer and I can never get above that. And this is, again, I am not ashamed. Like, I am not hating on therapy. I'm just saying, and there is different practices in therapy that can help you get above baseline too. There totally is. Totally is. I even said it at the beginning here, you need to go to therapy. And I'm actually chatting with someone right now who kind of like re-suggested a therapist to come on to the podcast and we can talk together about this concept and how we can work together, therapy and coaching, to really raise the collective. Anyway, it was like really curious to see my hairdresser have this realization as well and being like, yeah, like I only get to a certain level and we want to rise above that level. We want to change. We want to change. And we can only really change when we take radical responsibility. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It is going to be uncomfortable. And this is where a lot of somatic work will be helpful to teach your nervous system that you are actually safe and start to lean into the new beliefs and start to feel into the resistance and recognize the resistance with neutrality and awareness and start to shift it, start to love it. Like there's a lot to this work. It doesn't just happen overnight. But if you want to change, like this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. And I would really love for you to listen to this episode and start to think like, where in my life am I avoiding responsibility? And how can I start to take responsibility? How can I start to get uncomfortable and maybe own up to my personal mistakes as a path to growth? Because we all have a role to play in this. We all do. And the moment we can really realize our role is the moment we actually get to change. And when things shift inside of us, things outside of us shift. And I'm noticing this with one of my clients who, she's a pretty new client, and we've been working on her and, different tricks on like how to, for her to show up better in her relationship because, we don't have control over her partner, and how things are already shifting in her partner. Just from her taking a radical responsibility in her actions and what she can do and how she shows up for the relationship. And through that, her mirror image is changing. It's so freaking powerful. Radical responsibility accelerates your personal and your spiritual growth. It improves your relationships. It allows you to find mutual respect. And it really leads you to a more empowered and more fulfilling life. It's time to take radical responsibility, my love. And if you need some help with that, hit me up. I love helping my clients with this. I really do. Because I believe that every single one of you is so extremely powerful. So extremely powerful. And you can create the life of your wildest dreams when you allow yourself to take radical responsibility, to take control over what you actually can control. And it's okay if you'll hate me for this concept. It's cool. By now, I'm fucking used to it. Oh my goodness. Those of my clients who really embrace this concept and allow it themselves to look at their past through this lens, they have immense breakthroughs. Like one of my other clients recently was able to look at her life from the lens of cause and effect and look at her traumatic birth experience, look at her past relationships, look at her upbringing, look at the traumas she's experienced, and actually come to an empowering place and see like, wow, this has all led me to where I am today. And I'm making a change and I've overcome all of this, and that's empowering. And only before we started, she was still very much in the victim mindset of her past and all the things that had happened to her. And now she views it all through a new empowered lens. And she's making changes and having huge breakthroughs. This is powerful work. I hope you enjoyed it. Send me a message if you have questions, if you have feedback. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. You're beautiful. Stop fighting for your limitations and instead fight for your responsibility. Thank you for tuning into the Empower and Evolve podcast. It means so much to me that you've taken time out of your day to tune in. If you're open to it, and if you love the episode, I would love to invite you to take a couple of minutes to rate and review the podcast on either Apple Podcast or Spotify. This will help me reach new audiences and share this message more broadly. And if this episode really struck a chord with you, I would like to invite you to share it on social media and tag me at It's Coach Kat so we can spread the love together. Until next time, I'll catch you there.